This was the great question which then and for long afterwards brought a stir to the blood and a flush to the cheek of all the speculative builders and house agents, from Shepherd's Bush to the Marble Arch, and from Westbourne Grove to High Street, Kensington. I refer to the great affair of the improvements in Notting Hill. The scheme was conducted chiefly by Mr. Buck, the abrupt North Kensington magnate, and by Mr. Wilson, the Provost of Bayswater. A great thoroughfare was to be driven through three boroughs, through West Kensington, North Kensington, and Notting Hill, opening at one end into Hammersmith Broadway and the other into Westbourne Grove. The negotiations, buying, selling, bullying, and bribing took 10 years, and by the end of it Buck, who had conducted them almost single-handed, had proved himself a man of the strongest type of material energy and material diplomacy. And just as his splendid patience and more splendid impatience had finally brought him victory, when workmen were already demolishing houses and walls along the great line from Hammersmith, a sudden obstacle appeared that had neither been reckoned with nor dreamed of, a small and strange obstacle which, like a speck of grit in a great machine, jarred the whole vast scheme and brought it to a standstill. And Mr. Buck the draper, getting with great impatience into his robes of office, and summoning with indescribable disgust his halberdiers, hurried over to speak to the King. 10 years had not tired the King of his joke. There were still new faces to be seen, looking out from the symbolic headgears he had designed, gazing at him from amid the pastoral ribbons of Shepherd's Bush, or from under the sombre hoods of the Blackfriars Road. And the interview which was promised him with the Provost of North Kensington he anticipated with a particular pleasure, for he never really enjoyed, he said, the full richness of the mediaeval garments, unless the people compelled to wear them were very angry and businesslike. Mr. Buck was both. At the King's command the door of the audience chamber was thrown open, and a herald appeared in the purple colours of Mr. Buck's Commonwealth, emblazoned with the great eagle which the King had attributed to North Kensington, in vague reminiscence of Russia, for he always insisted on regarding North Kensington as some kind of semi-Arctic neighbourhood. The herald announced that the Provost of that city desired audience of the King. "From North Kensington," said the King, rising graciously. "What news does he bring from that land of high hills and fair women? He is welcome." The herald advanced into the room, and was immediately followed by 12 guards clad in purple, who were followed by an attendant bearing the banner of the eagle, who was followed by another attendant bearing the keys of the city upon his cushion, who was followed by Mr. Buck in a great hurry. When the King saw his strong animal face and steady eyes, he knew that he was in the presence of a great man of business, and consciously braced himself. "Well, well," he said cheerily, coming down 2 or 3 steps from a daïs and striking his hands lightly together, "I am glad to see you. Never mind, never mind. Ceremony is not everything." "I don't understand your Majesty," said the Provost stolidly. "Never mind, never mind," said the King gaily. "A knowledge of courts is by no means an unmixed merit. You will do it next time, no doubt." The man of business looked at him sulkily from under his black brows, and said again, without show of civility, "I don't follow you." "Well, well," replied the King good-naturedly, "if you ask me, I don't mind telling you. Not because I myself attach any importance to these forms in comparison with the honest heart, but it is usual, that is all, for a man, when entering the presence of royalty, to lie down on his back on the floor, and elevating his feet towards heaven, as the source of royal power, to say 3 times, 'Monarchical institutions improve the manners.' But there, there, such pomp is far less and truly dignified than your simple kindness." The Provost's face was red with anger, and he maintained silence. "And now," said the King lightly, and with the exasperating air of a man softening a snub, "what delightful weather we are having! You must find your official robes warm, my lord. I designed them for your own snow-bound land." "They are as hot as hell," said Buck briefly. "I came here on business." "Right," said the King, nodding a great number of times with quite unmeaning solemnity. "Right, right, right. Business, as the sad, glad old Persian said, is business. Be punctual, rise early, point the pen to the shoulder, point the pen to the shoulder, for you know not whence you come, nor why. Point the pen to the shoulder, for you know not where you go, nor where." The Provost pulled a number of papers from his pocket and savagely flapped them open. "Your Majesty may have heard," he began sarcastically, "of Hammersmith and a thing called a road. We have been at work 10 years, buying property and getting compulsory powers and fixing compensation and squaring vested interests, and now, at the very end, the thing is stopped by a fool. Old Prout, who was Provost of Notting Hill, was a business man, and we dealt with him quite satisfactorily. But he's dead, and the cursed lot has fallen on a young man named Wayne, who's up to some game that's perfectly incomprehensible to me. We offer him a better price than any one ever dreamt of, but he won't let the road go through, and his council seems to be backing him up. It's midsummer madness." The King, who was rather inattentively engaged in drawing the Provost's nose with his finger on the window pane, heard the last two words. "What a perfect phrase that is," he said. "Midsummer madness." "The chief point is," continued Buck doggedly, "that the only part that is really in question is one dirty little street, Pump Street, a street with nothing in it but a public house and a penny toy shop and that sort of thing. All the respectable people of Notting Hill have accepted our compensation, but the ineffable Wayne sticks out over Pump Street, says he's Provost of Notting Hill. He's only Provost of Pump Street." "A good thought," replied Auberon. "I like the idea of a Provost of Pump Street. Why not let him alone?" "And drop the whole scheme?" cried out Buck, with a burst of brutal spirit. "I'll be damned if we do. No, I'm for sending in workmen to pull down without more ado." "Strike for the Purple Eagle?" cried the King, hot with historical associations. "I'll tell you what it is," said Buck, losing his temper altogether. "If your Majesty would spend less time in insulting respectable people with your silly coats of arms, and more time over the business of the nation." The King's brow wrinkled thoughtfully. "The situation is not bad," he said. "The haughty burgher defying the King in his own palace. The burgher's head should be thrown back and the right arm extended. The left arm may be lifted toward heavens, but that I leave to your private religious sentiment. I have sunk back in this chair stricken with baffled fury. Now again, please." Buck's mouth opened like a dog's, but before he could speak another herald appeared at the door. "The Lord High Provost of Bayswater," he said, "desires an audience." "Admit him," said Auberon. "This is a jolly day." The halberdiers of Bayswater wore a prevailing uniform of green, and the banner which was borne after them was emblazoned with a green bay wreath on a silver ground, which the King, in the course of his researches into a bottle of champagne, had discovered it to be the quaint old punning cognizance of the city of Bayswater. "It is a fit symbol," said the King, "your immortal bay wreath. Fulham may seek for wealth and Kensington for art, but when did the men of Bayswater care for anything but glory?" Immediately behind the banner, and almost completely hidden by it, came the Provost of the city, clad in splendid robes of green and silver with white fur, and crowned with bay. He was an anxious little man with red whiskers, originally the owner of a small sweetstuff shop. "Our cousin of Bayswater," said the King with delight. "What can we get for you?" The King was heard also distinctly to mutter, "Cold beef, cold ham, cold chicken," his voice dying into silence. "I came to see your Majesty," said the Provost of Bayswater, whose name was Wilson, "about that Pump Street affair." "I have just been explaining the situation to his Majesty," said Buck, curtly, but recovering his civility. "I am not sure, however, whether his Majesty knows how much the matter affects you also." "It affects both of us, you see, your Majesty. As this scheme has started for the benefit of the whole neighbourhood, so Mr. Buck and me, we put our heads together." The King clasped his hands. "Perfect!" he cried in ecstasy. "Your heads together! I can see it. Can't you do it now? Oh, do it now!" A smothered sound of amusement appeared to come from the halberdiers, but Mr. Wilson looked merely bewildered, and Mr. Buck merely diabolical. "I suppose," he began bitterly, but the King stopped him with a gesture of listening. "Hush!" he said. "I think I hear someone else coming." I seem to hear another herald. The herald